Okay, this is the sliding compound miter saw. And it's got kind of a long name, again, sliding compound miter saw. So it's sliding because it slides, literally. Compound miter because we can cut a compound mitered angle with it. So we can actually tilt the bed here, and we can tilt the head where the motor and blade are. We probably won't have to do that for class at all. We may tilt the table here a little bit, but we're not going to tilt the entire head for any of the cuts that we're doing, at least not unless we're doing something really, really advanced. If we were doing crown molding, you could cut crown molding by doing that, or you can actually set the crown molding in here on the angle, which is another way that we would be able to do that. A neat feature with this particular model of the sliding miter saw is it has a little lock here on the side that sort of keeps it from sliding all the way back and also keeps it from sliding forward. So it sort of locks it in place, so the sliding feature is essentially disabled. There's also a lock on the top here, which is a really small little thumb screw, if you will. So in the back here, if I turn this and I just make that snug, it's also going to keep this from sliding front to back. If we loosen it, we have mobility once again, as long as that latch on the other side, which is just this little guy right here. If that's released, we can still slide forward and back. If that's locked in, it's not going to move on us. There's a locking pin here, which kind of keeps the whole head pressed down. If we push that in while it's down, it will hold it there. It's just for more or less transportation. But those are just some of the added little buttons that you guys don't necessarily need to use too often, but they are there. So if you ever come over to this thing and you need to cut a really wide board, look for some of those features to unlock it so that you can slide the miter saw. For the most part, I think we're going to leave it locked in. I'm going to unlock it just to show you how you would cut a wide board. So, first things first, you would turn it on at the top. You would bring it all the way out forward, all the way down through your board, and then send it back through the board on the return. Let go of the trigger, let it slow down, and then pull up the blade when it has stopped. That is the best and safest way to use a sliding miter saw. I've seen a lot of people that cut down and then pull out. That's terrible. That's the blade, that's the direction the blade is spinning, so it's going to actually grab the board and want to drive itself forward. And if you're not ready for it, or if there's any kind of warp or twist in the board, it's going to come running out of the saw at you, and it's going to really startle you. Another good tip, especially if you haven't used these a whole lot, is when you first pull that trigger, they have a good bit of kick that wants to throw the saw back up in the air. Just from the spinning motion of the blade, there's a lot of torque there. These are brand new saws, so they want to jump up even more than our older ones did. So I would turn them on when they're in the full upright position. If you're down like this and you pull the trigger, it's going to want to jump on you, and it's going to throw you, kind of startle you a little bit. So make sure that it is up all the way when you turn it on. With your piece of wood, you should make sure that your board is clearly marked, obviously, back up against the fence and flat on the table. And you need to hold on to that board as you cut it. If you're not holding the board, the saw is going to pick it up and throw it somewhere. You're probably going to mess up your board pretty badly. You're going to bend the fence on the saw. You could potentially knock some teeth out of the blade. So it's really important that it is back against the fence and it is down. If it's out like this, the blade's going to want to push it back. It's going to slam on there. And when it moves and turns, you're actually going to bind the blade because your cutting groove is changing. And you're going to pinch and bind the blade. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that's back against, flat on the table, and you're ready to make your cut. don't forget your safety glasses. So I cut all the way down through, I waited for it to stop, and there I have my nice piece that I cut off, and we're ready to move on to the next part. If you are right-handed, this saw is made for you. Your left hand is supposed to be on top of the table, holding down your board. If your hand is out here, your board is more likely to want to shift and move around. You have less control over it. You want to be in here, holding your board down. Not on top of the yellow, that's a no-go zone. Okay, you want to stay away from the yellow on the saw. That's like a danger zone, if you will. Danger zone. But you want to cut down through there, just like I did a second ago. If you need to cut a miter, try to have the miter, if it's possible, going away from your hand that's holding down the board. Sometimes it's sort of unavoidable, but what you don't want to do is try to cut like this, and now you have this tiny little area for your hand. It gets a lot more hazardous, a lot more dangerous. So you always want to be cutting away from yourself if possible. Another thing I've seen kids do is they try to hold the board with their right and run the saw with their left, and this is running the blade dangerously close to your arm. And if you're standing over here, you're actually going to run the blade right through your arm. So don't do that. Never crisscross your arms. If you are left-handed, you really should stand on this side of the saw, hold the board with your right, operate with your left. Okay? If you're right-handed, like most, you're going to be over here on the left side of the saw, operating with your right. It does feel a little bit awkward if you're left-handed because the handle is on sort of the wrong side. But it's much safer to use it on the appropriate side, depending on which hand you are dominant with. Two major things: keep that board down, keep it back against the fence, and hold the board. I guess that's three things. Other than that, keep your fingers away from the blade, and you won't have any problems. Okay? If this is locked in and it doesn't slide, it's going to be a lot safer to just cut straight down. If you need to cut a wider board, that's when you need to unlock this so that it can come all the way to the front, all the way down, all the way back. And that's the miter saw, folks, the sliding compound miter saw.